The massive Confederation space station hung like a gleaming jewel against the darkness of space. Inside the grand reception hall, beings from 50 different worlds mingled, their varied body shapes and colorful diplomatic attire creating a living mosaic. Today marked a historic occasion, humanity's official welcome into the Galactic Confederation. Ambassador John Miller led the small human delegation across the polished floor. His simple black suit looked plain next to the elaborate ceremonial armor of the Zarkan or the floating silk robes of the ethereal collective representatives. Behind him walked his team, 5 men and women in equally modest attire, carrying data tablets and smiling politely at the curious aliens they passed. "Which ones are their warriors?" whispered Kravosh, a tall insectoid diplomat, his translator barely catching the chittering sounds. His companion, a blue-skinned humanoid, flicked her ears in confusion. "I don't see any. Perhaps they're still aboard their ship." Susan Clark, officially listed as Miller's administrative assistant, heard every word despite standing 10 meters away. She maintained her pleasant smile, adjusting the simple pin on her lapel, a pin that could deploy into a compact but lethal weapon if needed. 20 years in special forces hadn't dulled her hearing or her reflexes, though on paper she was now just a civilian aide. High Admiral Zex Terrell of the Zarkan approached Miller, his crimson battle scales gleaming under the artificial light. 4 armed guards flanked him, their hands never straying far from ceremonial but functional plasma blades. "Ambassador Miller," he rumbled through his translator, "the Confederation welcomes Earth to our ranks." His 4 eyes blinked in an unsynchronized pattern that Susan recognized as amusement or possibly contempt. "Though I must say, your lack of military escort is unusual. Do humans not value proper martial representation during first contacts?" Miller smiled warmly. "Thank you for the welcome, Admiral. On Earth, we find that our diplomatic corps serves us well in these situations. Our military remains ready should they be needed, but we prefer peaceful faces during peaceful meetings." The Admiral's scales rippled in what Susan recognized as the Zarkan equivalent of laughter. "Peace is maintained through strength, human. The Confederation has stood for 11,000 years because those who would threaten us know our warriors stand ready." "A wise philosophy," Miller replied smoothly. "Earth has had its share of conflicts as well. We've learned many lessons from them." The Grand Arbiter of the Confederation, a willowy being with glowing patterns shifting across its translucent skin, floated toward them. "Welcome, children of Earth," it said in a voice like chimes. "The Confederation has reviewed your application and technological achievements. You will be granted Class 3 membership, with appropriate trading rights and protection responsibilities." Susan noticed Miller's slight frown. Class 3 was near the bottom of the Confederation hierarchy, typically assigned to species considered militarily insignificant. "We are grateful for acceptance," Miller said carefully, though Earth had hoped for Class 2 status, given our industrial capacity. The Grand Arbiter's patterns shifted to a cooler blue. "Your industrial capacity is indeed impressive, but the Confederation structure weighs defensive contribution heavily. Your species has only a modest orbital defense system, and your military vessels are few compared to your population. Perhaps in time, with development." "Of course," Miller nodded. "We understand." Later, in their private quarters, Miller's pleasant diplomatic mask fell away. "They've completely misunderstood us," he said to Susan and the others. "As expected, sir," Susan replied. "They all have specialized warrior castes. The concept that every human has basic combat training doesn't fit their understanding. They classify us as weak because we don't parade around in battle armor," said Pete Daniels, the delegation's logistics coordinator, who had once commanded a nuclear submarine. Miller gazed out the viewport at the massive alien warships docked around the station. "Let them think what they want for now. Maybe it's better this way." "Incoming priority message from Earth Command," announced Rick Foster, communications specialist. "The Void Scourge has destroyed another outer colony. The Confederation military failed to stop them." "So it begins," Miller murmured. "Maintain civilian protocols, everyone. For now, we're just simple diplomats." Susan nodded, knowing that all 8 billion humans back on Earth were anything but simple. In a galaxy of specialized warriors, humanity's secret weapon was hiding in plain sight. 6 months passed since humanity joined the Confederation. Human tourists, merchants, and diplomatic staff gradually spread throughout Confederation space. They smiled, traded goods, learned alien languages, and blended into the background of galactic society. Drenthal, chief cynobiologist for the Exolith Science Academy, updated his observation logs on human behavior. He tapped his long fingers against his console, adding to his growing collection of puzzling incidents. Human subject displays unusual physical capabilities inconsistent with stated occupation, he muttered as he typed. Kevin Ross, maintenance technician at Orbital Platform Delta, lifted a fallen support beam weighing approximately 340 kilograms to free a trapped Valerian child. Subject claimed adrenaline caused temporary strength increase. Drenthal added this to the other cases: the human cook who caught 3 falling knives without looking, the elderly human teacher who outran a charging Graktar beast, the human nurse who disarmed an unstable patient with a move that resembled professional combat techniques. On the Confederation Trade Hub Mercantile Station, Grekval watched security footage from hidden cameras he had installed in the human quarter. As Confederation Intelligence's unofficial human specialist, he had grown increasingly suspicious of Earth's representatives. The footage showed Lydia Bennett, a merchant selling Earth textiles, alone in her shop after hours. She moved with fluid precision through what appeared to be fighting forms, her motions quick and practiced. According to her file, she was a simple trader with no military background. Yet Grekval had seen trained assassins with less skill. "Computer, compile physical baselines for all observed humans on the station," Grekval commanded. Analysis complete, the computer responded. Humans demonstrate average physical capabilities 30% above their submitted medical profiles. Grekval's ridged forehead furrowed. Every human he observed, from the children to the elderly, moved with an underlying awareness that reminded him of seasoned soldiers. They always noted exits when entering rooms. They positioned themselves with clear sightlines. They maintained physical fitness regardless of occupation. At the same time, in the Grand Confederation Council chamber, Admiral Zex Terrell slammed his armored fist on the table. Another outpost lost to the Void Scourge. The creatures advanced closer to core worlds while we debate. His translator conveyed the rage in his natural clicking speech. "Our military forces are extended to their limits," replied the ethereal representative, her voice serene despite the dire news. 3 battle fleets destroyed in the Outer Rim. The Scourge adapts to our tactics too quickly. Ambassador Miller sat quietly in the human delegation's modest seat, far from the central powers. Susan Clark stood behind him, recording notes as any good assistant would. Only Miller noticed how her eyes tracked every speaker, assessing threats and weaknesses with professional precision. Perhaps, Miller finally spoke, causing several alien heads to turn in surprise. The Confederation might consider alternative defense strategies. Earth has some experience with asymmetric warfare against superior forces. Admiral Zex Terrell's scales rippled with derision. "What would humans know of warfare? Your species barely maintains a proper military. The Void Scourge would consume your homeworld in days." Miller smiled politely. "You may be right, Admiral. Just a humble suggestion." Later that evening, Miller received an urgent communication from Earth Command in his secure quarters. The Void Scourge destroyed the Exolith Research Outpost in the Tau Ceti system, reported General Williams over the encrypted channel. Confederation forces were obliterated. Intelligence suggests 3 more systems will be attacked within the month. "Casualties?" Miller asked. 15 human researchers were stationed there. 12 made it out with hundreds of Exolith civilians. They improvised an escape. Miller nodded. "The Confederation still doesn't suspect." "No, But that xenobiologist, Drenfall, is asking questions. He noticed our people are stronger and faster than our medical records show. Let him wonder, Miller replied. Earth Command believes we need to maintain our cover a while longer. If the Confederation knew every human was combat trained from childhood, they might see us as a threat rather than a potential ally. And the Void Scourge. Miller's face hardened. If they keep advancing, the Confederation will soon be desperate enough to accept help from anyone, even a species of supposedly weak civilians. In the station's gym, Kevin Ross bench-pressed weights that would crush a normal human, carefully ensuring no aliens were watching. Soon, he knew, the pretense would end. He just hoped the galaxy was ready for the truth about humanity. The grand hall of Outpost Zeta 9 glittered with floating lights and the colorful formal wear of a dozen alien species. As an important trading hub and diplomatic post near the border regions, Zeta 9 hosted the annual Confederation Unity celebration with extra splendor this year. Alan Wright, listed in official records as a human cultural attaché, sipped a drink while scanning the room. His eyes noted the positions of all 23 humans present. Most were scattered throughout the crowd. Nancy Barnes from the communications office chatted with ethereal diplomats, while Sam Green and Diane Powell, registered as tourism consultants, mingled near the refreshment tables. Quite the gathering, said Admiral Zexterrel, suddenly appearing beside Alan. Your first Unity celebration, yes. It is. Alan smiled. The Confederation certainly knows how to throw a party. The Admiral's scales rippled with amusement. Indeed. Though I notice your Ambassador Miller is absent. Diplomatic business on Earth. I'm afraid we humans are still finding our place in galactic affairs. The Admiral leaned closer. My sources tell me your people have been asking unusual questions about our military deployment patterns. Curious behavior for cultural representatives. Before Alan could respond, the station's alarms blared. The festive lights dimmed, replaced by pulsing red emergency indicators. Attention all personnel, the station AI announced. Multiple Void Scourge vessels detected. This is not a drill. All military personnel report to defense stations. Civilians proceed to designated shelters. Chaos erupted in the Grand Hall. Diplomats and merchants panicked, rushing toward exits. Security guards tried to maintain order without success. Alan's hand touched the small communicator in his ear. All Earth-side personnel, activate emergency protocol Sierra 9. Around the room, every human immediately stopped what they were doing. Their postures changed subtly but distinctly. Backs straighter, eyes focused, movements precise. Everyone stay calm. Alan's voice cut through the panic, carrying an unexpected tone of command. Follow station evacuation procedures. Nancy Barnes, moments ago a smiling office worker, now moved with military precision. She reached behind a decorative panel, pressed a hidden switch, and pulled out an emergency kit no one knew was there. Admiral. Alan turned to the surprised Zar Khan. Your warriors should focus on defense. My people can handle civilian evacuation. Before the Admiral could object, a violent explosion rocked the station. The ceiling partially collapsed, separating the room into sections. In the eastern portion, Diane Powell organized terrified aliens into orderly groups. Those who can walk, help those who can't. Move calmly toward the emergency shuttles. Sam Green, trapped with a group of exilith scientists, pulled a small device from his pocket that expanded into sophisticated cutting tools. Stand back, he ordered, attacking the sealed door with professional skill. In the main hall, Alan found himself with Admiral Zexterrel and several other high-ranking aliens cut off from the primary exits. The emergency shaft is our best option, Alan said, pulling up station schematics on his personal device. How does a cultural attaché have access to restricted station layouts? Demanded the Admiral. Another explosion hit, stronger than the first. The floor buckled. A Valerian diplomat lost his footing and fell toward a jagged metal edge. Alan moved with impossible speed, catching the alien midair with one arm while stabilizing himself against the wall with the other. "What are you?" the Admiral asked, his translator struggling to convey his mixture of suspicion and awe. Alan ignored the question. "Nancy, status report." Nancy's voice came through his earpiece. "Eastern sectors evacuated. Sam has breached the sealed section. 53 aliens rescued. Craig and Laura are defending the shuttle bay against Void Scourge boarding parties." Defending. The Admiral's scales flared. "Your tourists are fighting the Scourge." A third explosion hit. Emergency lights failed, plunging the room into darkness. "Light sticks," Alan commanded, "and all humans present immediately produced military-grade illumination devices." In the harsh chemical light, the Admiral watched as Alan pulled a concealed weapon from his formal wear. With practiced movements, Alan checked the power cell and settings. "I thought humans didn't carry weapons," the Admiral said quietly. Alan's face showed no emotion as he replied, "There's a lot about humans you don't know, Admiral. Now stay behind me if you want to live through this. The real fight is just beginning." Security footage throughout the station recorded the same scene repeating. Humans in civilian clothes organizing evacuations, accessing emergency systems, and in some cases, directly engaging Void Scourge attackers with hidden weapons. And the Confederation Security Council chamber fell silent as the video footage from Outpost Zeta 9 ended. On the large display, the final image froze. A human tourist named Laura Kelly taking down 3 Void Scourge attackers with precise combat moves before helping injured aliens to an escape pod. Frank Miller sat alone at the testimony table, facing the half-circle of alien council members. As a human lieutenant officially registered as a diplomatic aide, he was now the center of an official inquiry. Lieutenant Miller began the ethereal counselor, her translucent form shimmering with concerned patterns. "Would you please explain how a human tourism consultant demonstrated elite combat skills?" Frank maintained a neutral expression. "I believe Ms. Kelly mentioned in her statement that she takes self-defense classes as a hobby." Admiral Zexterral's scales darkened with anger. "Self-defense classes do not teach someone to disable 3 Void Scourge warriors. I have combat veterans who couldn't manage that feat." From his observation seat, Grekval of Confederation Intelligence nodded to his assistant. The assistant touched controls, and new footage appeared on the screen. Dozens of clips showing humans across Confederation space performing feats that required combat training. "The Security Council has collected evidence over 6 months," Grekval stated. Kevin Ross, registered as a maintenance worker, disarmed a malfunctioning security drone using military-grade techniques. Lydia Bennett, a textile merchant, practices advanced combat forms in her private quarters. Alan Wright accessed restricted emergency protocols on Zeta 9 that only security personnel should know. The Grand Arbiter raised a glowing appendage. "Lieutenant Miller, how do you explain that every human witness from the Zeta 9 incident demonstrated similar combat capabilities? The statistical probability of this occurring naturally is less than 0.03%. Frank looked directly at the assembled council. "Humans value self-reliance. Many of our people pursue various forms of self-improvement." Trenfall, the Exilith xenobiologist, stepped forward with his own display. "Council members, my team conducted medical scans of rescued humans after the Zeta 9 attack. Every subject showed muscle density 30% higher than their registered medical profiles. Their neural response times were enhanced. Their cardiovascular systems performed at peak efficiency even under extreme stress. These are biological markers of intensive combat training," added Grekval. "Every human we've tested shows similar results." "Is humanity deceiving the Confederation?" asked the Valerian representative. "Are these people secretly military personnel disguised as civilians?" Frank shifted uncomfortably. "I am not authorized to." "You will answer the Council's questions," interrupted Admiral Zexterral. "Does Earth maintain a hidden military presence throughout Confederation space?" Before Frank could respond, the chamber doors opened, Ambassador John Miller entered, flanked by Susan Clark and two other human staff members. Honorable Council. The ambassador's voice filled the room. I apologize for interrupting these proceedings, but this inquiry has reached a point where I must intervene. Ambassador Miller. The Grand Arbiter's patterns flashed with surprise. This is a closed security hearing. I understand. However, as Earth's representative, I must address these concerns directly. Ambassador Miller moved to stand beside Lieutenant Frank Miller. The lieutenant is not authorized to reveal classified information about Earth's defense protocols. I am. Then explain, demanded Admiral Zex Terrell, why your civilians fight like elite warriors. What you witnessed at Outpost Zeta 9 was not an anomaly. Ambassador Miller replied calmly. Every human you've encountered in Confederation space has indeed received combat training, not because they are disguised soldiers, but because on Earth there is no real distinction between civilian and soldier. A murmur of confusion spread through the council chamber. What do you mean, no distinction? Asked Drenthal, his scientific curiosity piqued. Ambassador Miller looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each council member. I request an emergency session with the High Council immediately. What I must share about humanity's true nature goes beyond security concerns. It touches on the fundamental differences between our species and may change how the Confederation views warfare itself. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, the Grand Arbiter nodded. We will convene the High Council within the hour. Ambassador Miller, we expect complete honesty. You'll have it, Miller promised. Though I doubt you're prepared for the truth about Earth. The High Council chamber of the Confederation was rarely used for single-species hearings. Its grand circular design featured tiered seating for the representatives of all 57 member species. Today, only the 12 High Councilors occupied their seats, their attention fixed on Ambassador John Miller, who stood alone in the center of the chamber. You claim that humans make no real distinction between civilians and soldiers, said the Grand Arbiter, its glowing form pulsing with cautious curiosity. Please explain this concept. Miller nodded. To understand humanity, you must first understand Earth. Our homeworld has known war for as long as we have recorded history, not the organized conflicts between professional armies that most Confederation species experienced, but constant, persistent warfare that touched every corner of our planet. He activated a holographic display showing scenes from Earth's history, ancient battles, modern conflicts, guerrilla warfare. Unlike your species, humans never developed specialized warrior castes. Every human at some point in our evolution needed to be ready to fight. Those who couldn't defend themselves didn't survive to pass on their genes. Admiral Zex Terrell leaned forward. You're saying your entire species evolved as warriors? In a sense, Miller replied. What you call military training, we simply call education. Every human child learns basic self-defense. Physical fitness is a core value in our schools. Strategic thinking is taught through games and sports. Our entertainment often simulates combat scenarios. Drenthal, permitted to attend as a scientific observer, made rapid notes. Fascinating. Your culture weaponized normal development processes. We don't see it that way, Miller countered. We see it as preparation for survival. The designation civilian on Earth merely indicates current job assignment, not capability. A human teacher can fight. A human doctor can fight. A human artist can fight. Some better than others, certainly, but all with basic competence. Holographic images showed ordinary Earth scenes, schools with combat training classes alongside mathematics, hospitals where staff practiced security drills, artists who maintained physical training regimens. You deceived the Confederation, accused the Valerian Councilor. You presented yourselves as a peaceful species with minimal military capacity. We never lied, Miller said firmly. Earth does maintain a modest official military force by percentage of population. What we didn't explain is that our entire population serves as a reserve force. When needed, any human can step into a military role. The ethereal counselor's patterns shifted to show deep concern. This explains your species' accelerated advancement. Most civilizations collapse from internal conflicts when developing new technologies. Yours channeled its warlike tendencies into progress. We had to, Miller said simply. On Earth, adapt or die was not a philosophy but a reality. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The security minister, a reptilian Draxon, finally spoke. How many combat-ready humans currently exist? All of them, Miller replied without hesitation. 8 billion. Another wave of murmurs filled the chamber. In the Zeta-9 incident, continued Miller, those weren't elite soldiers revealing themselves. Those were ordinary humans responding to a crisis. The maintenance worker who held off Void Scourge attackers was just that, a maintenance worker. But like all humans, he received basic combat training throughout his life. Admiral Zek's Terrell scales had lost their hostile coloration, now showing the pale blue of deep thought. This changes everything we understood about your species' potential. It should, Miller agreed. Earth didn't join the Confederation seeking protection. We joined seeking allies. The Void Scourge threatens all our worlds. You have specialized warriors. We have a different approach. The Grand Arbiter's glow dimmed momentarily, a sign of processing difficult information. Ambassador, if what you say is true, humanity represents both an opportunity and a concern for the Confederation. I understand your caution, Miller said. A species where every member is combat-ready might seem threatening. But consider this. While your specialized warriors fight and die against the Void Scourge, our approach offers a different solution. In humanity, you don't get just our soldiers. You get all of us. And what exactly are you proposing? Asked the security minister. Miller smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Let us help, not just with our limited official military, but with all our people. From our perspective, there are no civilians in this war. 2 weeks after Ambassador Miller's revelation, the Void Scourge launched their largest attack yet. 6 massive high ships emerged from jump points near Talaris Prime, a major Confederation world with 15 billion inhabitants. The planet's orbital defenses fired continuously, but the dark, twisted shapes of the Scourge vessels absorbed the energy blasts and pressed onward. In the planetary capital, chaos reigned. Talarian civilians, tall blue-skinned beings with 4 arms, rushed through streets seeking shelter. Their warrior caste fought bravely at defensive positions, but the Void Scourge dropships broke through the atmosphere in overwhelming numbers. On the northern continent, 2 human exchange students watched the black ships descend. Bill Carter and Judy Martinez had been studying Talarian agriculture as part of a cultural program. Now they stood among panicked aliens in the central plaza of Northreach City. The evacuation is failing, Judy said calmly, watching the Talarian warriors trying to organize the crowd without success. Their military isn't trained for civilian management. Bill nodded, and the civilians aren't trained for emergency protocols. He raised his voice, speaking in perfect Talarian. Everyone listen. Form lines by neighborhood districts, children and elderly in the center. The Talarians stared at the human in surprise. A warrior approached, his ceremonial armor gleaming. This is a military matter, human. Return to the evacuation line. Your people are dying while you maintain protocol, Bill replied. Let us help. Before the warrior could answer, a Void Scourge fighter screamed overhead. The crowd scattered in renewed panic. Bill and Judy exchanged a look. Without another word to the warrior, they sprinted to different sides of the plaza. Judy jumped onto a fountain base and whistled sharply, a sound that cut through the chaos. Northwest quadrant, follow me, she shouted. Stay together. Link arms with 4 others. Across the plaza, Bill had commandeered an abandoned security station. He activated the emergency broadcast system and began giving clear, direct orders in a tone that made people instinctively obey. The Talarian warrior watched in amazement as the 2 humans brought order to thousands of panicked civilians within minutes. What stunned him most was how the humans moved, with the precision and awareness he'd seen only in elite military units. Similar scenes played out across Confederation space. On the trading hub Mercantile Station, human merchants converted their ships into evacuation vessels, punching through Void Scourge blockades with improvised defenses and evasive maneuvers no civilian pilots should know. In the Confederation Fleet Command Center, Admiral Zex Terrell received reports from a dozen battlefronts. Tellera's prime evacuation proceeding at 300% expected efficiency, reported his aide. Human exchange students have organized local resistance. Human merchants have evacuated over 20,000 civilians from orbit. And Outpost Zorus? The Admiral asked. Lost, sir. But the research data was saved. The human science team destroyed the facility rather than let it fall to the enemy. The Admiral's scales shifted thoughtfully. Contact Ambassador Miller. Tell him the High Council is ready to discuss Earth's offer of assistance. Hours later, in an emergency session, the Confederation leadership faced a grim reality. Our conventional forces have failed, admitted the Security Minister. 3 core worlds under attack. 2 already lost. Our military doctrine isn't working against the Scourge. Ambassador Miller stood calmly before them. Earth is prepared to deploy civilian advisors to all major Confederation installations and population centers. Civilian advisors, repeated Admiral Zex Terrell, his translator conveying a hint of irony. You mean your soldiers in disguise? I mean exactly what I said, Miller replied firmly. Our educational specialists can teach basic defense to your civilians. Our engineering teams can adapt commercial technology for military applications. Our medical staff can improve battlefield treatment. And yes, all of them can fight if needed. The Grand Arbiter's patterns glowed with decision. We accept Earth's assistance, but we have conditions. Name them, Miller said. Your people will serve in advisory positions only. They will not command Confederation forces, and they will operate under supervision. Miller smiled slightly. Agreed, though I suspect those conditions will evolve as the situation develops. The Security Minister leaned forward. How quickly can your civilians deploy? They already have, Miller replied. Every human in Confederation space received updated instructions the moment the attack began. They're already organizing resistance, coordinating evacuations, and preparing defenses. That's the advantage of our approach. We don't wait for orders to act. 1 month into the official human advisory program, the Confederation War Room buzzed with activity. Screens displayed battle maps across 12 star systems, with red markers showing Void Scourge positions and blue showing Confederation forces. For the first time in months, the blue markers were advancing. Patricia Davis stood before the main tactical display. Her official title was Office Administration Specialist, but now she directed a team of Confederation military planners. The slender woman with gray-streaked hair pointed to a cluster of enemy ships. The Scourge always follows the same attack pattern when faced with superior numbers, she explained. They retreat, regroup, then strike from an unexpected vector. But what if we make them think they're winning when they're not? Admiral Zex Terrell watched with fascination as Patricia outlined a battle plan that violated every principle of Confederation military doctrine. Instead of concentrated forces, she proposed scattered, seemingly random deployments. Instead of direct confrontation, she suggested false retreats and ambushes. Instead of protecting valuable targets, she recommended using them as bait. This goes against all established tactical wisdom, the Admiral protested. Patricia smiled. Exactly. The Scourge has adapted to your tactics. They haven't adapted to ours. And where did an office worker learn military strategy? Asked a Draxan commander. Historical board games, actually, Patricia replied. I've played strategic simulations since childhood. Most humans do. We learn to think like our opponents, to anticipate their responses. To us, warfare is not just about strength. It's about deception and adaptation. In the Tav Ceti system, a fleet of converted human merchant vessels approached a Void Scourge patrol. Their commander, George Stevens, had spent 30 years transporting goods across Earth's oceans before moving to space freight. Now he led a squadron of ships that were never designed for combat. "Maintain irregular thruster patterns," he ordered over the comm. "They're looking for military formations. Move like civilians running scared." The human ships drifted chaotically, appearing disorganized. The Void Scourge vessels moved to intercept what looked like easy prey. "They've taken the bait," reported George's second, a former delivery pilot. "All enemy vessels committing to pursuit." "Execute pattern Delta," George commanded calmly. The seemingly panicked human ships suddenly shifted with perfect coordination. They split into 3 groups, executed a complex maneuver that no civilian should have known, and surrounded the surprised Scourge vessels. "Fire all converted mining lasers," George ordered. Energy beams designed for asteroid cutting sliced through the Scourge ship's vulnerable rear sections, where Patricia's analysis had identified structural weaknesses. Similar scenes played out across Confederation space. Humans in advisory positions introduced concepts alien to the specialized warrior castes: guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, improvised weapons, and most importantly, the idea that anyone could fight. In a secure meeting room, Drenthal presented his findings to the High Council. "After studying human combat methods, I've identified their key advantage. The Confederation trains warriors to follow established doctrine. Humans train everyone to adapt and improvise. Their approach lacks discipline," objected the Zarkan military representative. "Their approach creates unpredictability," countered Drenthal. "The Void Scourge can predict how trained warriors will respond. They cannot predict what a human merchant ship captain or office worker might do." The Grand Arbiter's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "What are you suggesting, scientist?" "That we learn from them," Drenthal replied. "Some Confederation species have already begun implementing human-style training for their civilian populations." The Zarkan representative's scales darkened with disapproval. "Our warrior traditions have stood for millennia. We cannot abandon them for human chaos." "Perhaps not abandon," Ambassador Miller suggested, entering the room. "But supplement. Your warriors are magnificent, Admiral, strong, disciplined, fearless. But the Scourge has learned to counter those qualities. They haven't learned to counter human unpredictability." Admiral Zex Terrell stared at the battle displays, where human-led forces continued to push back the enemy. His scales slowly shifted to contemplative blue. "The Zarkan have never sought advice on warfare from another species," he said finally. "But we have also never faced an enemy like the Scourge. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human way." Miller nodded respectfully. "Your warriors and our civilians working together, the Scourge won't know what hit them." Across the stars, what began as human advisory roles had evolved into something more. Not commanders, but partners, teaching Confederation species that in war, sometimes the most dangerous fighter isn't the one in armor, but the one you never suspected could fight at all. The massive space battle near Proxima Relay would later be recorded as the turning point in the war against the Void Scourge. 3 months of combined human Confederation tactics had pushed the enemy back to this strategic point, where jump gates connected 5 major star systems. On the Confederation flagship, Admiral Zex Terrell stood side by side with Susan Clark, the human who had once posed as Ambassador Miller's administrative assistant. Now her true expertise as a tactical specialist was acknowledged openly. "They're forming their standard defensive shell," the Admiral observed as the main view screen showed hundreds of Void Scourge ships arranging themselves in a sphere. Susan nodded, "Just as we expected. Their behavior patterns are becoming predictable." She touched her communication device. "All human vessels execute Maneuver Omega. All Confederation forces maintain primary engagement protocol." The bridge crew watched in amazement as 60 human ships, most of them converted civilian vessels, broke formation and scattered in seemingly random directions. At the same time, The main Confederation fleet advanced in perfect military precision toward the Scourge physician. "The enemy is responding to our primary advance," reported a Zar-Chan officer. "They're shifting to attack formation." Susan smiled slightly, and ignoring the irregular human movements, just as we predicted. On one of the human ships, Rick Foster, formerly introduced as a communications specialist, guided his small vessel through a debris field. Two other human ships followed his exact path, their pilots matching his every move with precision that revealed years of synchronized training. "Approaching optimal position," Rick reported. "All harmony disruptors ready." These weapons, based on human music theory and designed by a human composer who understood wave interference patterns, had proven devastatingly effective against the Scourge's hive mind communication. "All human vessels in position," Susan informed the Admiral. "Ready on your command." Admiral Zex Terrell's scales shifted to the bright red of battle excitement. Execute final phase. Across the battlefield, human ships activated their specialized weapons simultaneously. The Void Scourge formation, which had been focused on the main Confederation fleet, suddenly broke apart in confusion as their hive communication collapsed. "Confederation forces, advance," ordered the Admiral. The battle that followed was quick and decisive. Without their coordinated hive mind, the Void Scourge ships fell one by one to the combined Confederation human attack. Within hours, the enemy force was destroyed or retreating, and the Proxima relay secured. 3 weeks later, Ambassador Miller entered the Grand Council chamber to thunderous applause from representatives of all Confederation species. The campaign following the Proxima Relay victory had pushed the Void Scourge back beyond Confederation borders. For the first time in years, the galaxy breathed easier. The Grand Arbiter's form glowed with formal brilliance. "Ambassador Miller, the Confederation owes humanity a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Your people's contribution to our victory has changed everything." Miller bowed slightly. "We are pleased to have helped, but the victory belongs to all our species working together. Nevertheless," continued the Arbiter, "the High Council has voted unanimously to upgrade Earth's status to Class 1 membership, with all associated privileges and responsibilities." More applause filled the chamber. Admiral Zex Terrell stepped forward, his scales shimmering with the gold color of respect. "When humans first joined the Confederation," the Admiral said, "I mistook your lack of visible military for weakness. I believed a species without a warrior caste could not understand true combat." He paused. "I have never been so pleased to be proven wrong." The Admiral extended his ceremonial battle blade, a gesture never before offered to a non-Zarkan, and presented it to Miller. "The Zarkan will be sending students to Earth," he announced, "to learn your ways of training. Perhaps there is wisdom in preparing all our people, not just those born to fight." Miller accepted the blade with appropriate solemnity. "We welcome the exchange of knowledge. Many Confederation military techniques have already improved Earth's defense systems." The Grand Arbiter raised its glowing appendages for silence. "Let this victory mark a new understanding among our peoples. The humans have shown us that strength comes in many forms, and that those who appear most peaceful may in fact be most prepared for war." As Miller looked around the chamber, he saw new respect in the eyes of the gathered representatives. The secret of humanity was now a secret no longer. In a galaxy of specialized warriors, humans had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes from making everyone a soldier. "We look forward to a long and productive partnership," Miller said simply. And throughout Confederation space, aliens looked at their human neighbors with new understanding, wondering what other surprises these strange beings, with no distinction between civilian and soldier, might yet reveal.